Hi everyone, it's Raina. So I just wanted to do a quick little video about Demi Moore's astrological chart. Just kind of like mention a few things. And the reason I'm doing this is because I just finished her autobiography. What was the name of it? Now I've already forgotten. Inside Out? I don't know. And I was really impressed. I have been following her career since General Hospital. For those of you who remember back in the day when it was such a sensation and everybody would, gather around the TV set to watch Luke and Laura. And I think I have like a cassette tape somewhere where I actually like taped a scene from Demi Moore. That's how much of a geek I was for General Hospital. Um, and she was born in 1962. So she's a few years older than I am. And she was born on November 11th. So, she's a Scorpio. But I thought that was interesting that she was born on November 11th. And I didn't realize how messed up of a childhood she had, like just incredible dysfunction with both of her parents. And it's kind of interesting. That's one of the reasons I love biographies and autobiographies so much, is that sometimes you really formulate an opinion about somebody who is famous and you just assume that they have it made and everything is perfect, and you find out that that's so not true. And it's inspirational in the sense that we don't put people up on pedestals or envy other people, but we realize that it doesn't matter how much money you have or how beautiful you are. You can really be carrying around a lot of pain, a lot of trauma. And that's exactly how she described it, because she figured out eventually that she did go through a lot of trauma, through all of the upheaval that she dealt with and just different things. I highly recommend the book because I found her to be incredibly insightful. And of course, being a Scorpio, I figured she would have a very good handle on, the psychological motivation of other people. And I was very impressed by her insight. And it was very wise. It wasn't like just, typical kind of like judgments that people place on others. For instance, when she's talking about her parents, she can see beyond some of their dysfunctional behaviors and understand why they were the way that they were. And especially with her mother, it was very touching. But then when I looked at her chart, I saw not only did she have the sun in Scorpio, she has the sun, Mercury, Venus, and Neptune all in the 8th house, which is Scorpio's house. So this is the house of trauma. This is the house of psychological analysis and the shadow. And somebody who has the sun in the 8th house, I have the sun in the 8th house, and I've done a video, you could call it an audio, about this. So if you have the sun in the 8th house, check out my video on it, because I've gotten some good feedback. And I think, part of that is having it myself. I think it makes it easier to talk about, obviously. But, no matter what your sun sign is, if you have the sun in the 8th house, you're going to be like an honorary sun in Scorpio. And so here's this woman who's already a sun in Scorpio, and then she has this. So it's like a double whammy in a sense. Her natal Mercury is also in Scorpio in that house. Well, all those planets are, because it's pretty self-contained in that particular house. There's not she might have like 1 degree of Sag in that house, but yeah, all those personal planets are in Scorpio, and then she has Neptune. Oh, Neptune's in Scorpio, but what is in? Oh, they're all in Scorpio. And one of the things that I noticed about her chart is that she's got a lot of squares going on. So, especially with fixed energy, when you have squares, I think that's pretty tough, and it can indicate a lot of challenges in life that you have to overcome. So she's got the Sun square Mars, the Moon square Mars, Mercury square Mars, and Venus square Mars. And so, that can indicate self-defeating behaviors. That can indicate feeling like you're kind of climbing up this hill, and like you're like the world is against you, especially with the Sun square Mars. The Moon square Mars, if anybody out there has the Moon square Mars, this can indicate, in some cases, a volatile emotional nature. It depends on the two planets. I mean, the two signs that comprise the Moon and Mars. For Demi, she has the Moon in Taurus and Mars in Leo. Now, the Moon is your emotional nature, and Mars can be the way that anger manifests for you. And by the way, Demi Moore has Pisces rising. And when I am looking at charts of people and I see Pisces in a prominent position like Sun, Moon, or Rising, as well as planets in the 12th house, or even the 8th house, because that can also indicate some kind of sublimated, some trauma situation, that person had a rough childhood. And what was that thing? I was formulating a concept here of like how that can indicate that when the person grows up that they change. Oh, what I was going to say is that when it's the rising sign that Pisces is in, I believe that the person's life gets better as they get older. If it's a sun sign or the moon sign, they're going to have to, this is something embedded in their overall nature, the idea of sacrifice and even victimhood. And the person has to make sure that they confront these concepts and do not allow them to permeate their consciousness as like a default viewpoint. In other words, when I see a person's chart and they have the moon in Pisces, there's a very good chance that they have a pattern of being somebody who almost believes that love means suffering. And so they are down with that. They are, I'm being a little bit facetious, but it's almost like they feel that is their mission in life, is to be like the sacrificial lamb in love, to be the martyr, the one that suffers in love, but does so with that sense that they're trying to be the healer, the Christ-like figure. And you will see in those cases that love can be disappointing for them because Pisces is ruled by Neptune, and that illusion can kind of take over and cloud the judgment. And the person tends to fall in love with the wrong person and give their heart to the wrong person. Not to say that we shouldn't love everyone, but you know what I'm talking about in a personal way. So with Demi, I always want to say, is it Demi or Demi? With Demi, she's got all these contacts with Neptune. Now remember, this is her ruler because it's on her ascendant. So this is very influential to begin with. But if you're somebody out there in YouTube land who has a lot of contacts to Neptune, be it good or not so much, understand that that is still going to give you an intuitive nature. But the more hard angles that you have, the more you have to really fight against delusional thinking in terms of it can run the gamut. It can be as simple as just seeing things as you want to see them, deluding yourself, lying to yourself, and in some cases, when it's really extreme and maybe there are other things going on with Mercury, I guess, that are hard, like an afflicted Mercury, that there might be mental illness because Neptune can be, the 12th house that Neptune rules is about mental health. But with hard angles, that could be like challenges to your mental health. But in general, even with friendly angles, this can present a problem of escapism and self-delusion. Although I do think that a lot of these so-called astrological experts are just prejudiced against Neptune, and they see the negative side of it. Neptune is the planet of idealism. And I mean, if anybody out there has ever dealt with a Moon in Pisces individual, it's it's a lost cause in terms of trying to get them to see the light about a particular person or even an issue that they are emotionally invested in. I mean, I just have this experience with it myself, and it's just funny, just to think about it. But she has the sun in conjunction with Neptune, which can give her a very spiritual nature. Remember, spiritual and religious are not synonymous. Some people are very pious and very otherworldly, and this is good for actors and actresses because they can channel other people's kind of energy and become these different characters. Neptune is without boundaries, so it's about inhabiting different beings, channeling different beings. And, like when you think about Halloween and costumes, that's very Neptunian to try to the chameleon, the shapeshifter. And so that conjunction would give a person who's like, the sun is like the ego and the identity, but she complained about not feeling that she had a sense of identity. And she was like looking for it through her relationships. And apparently the opposition is kind of like talking about relationships. And she did have, yeah, I see it right here. She had the moon in opposition to Venus. So kind of like not sure how to relate in relationships. With Bruce Willis, she was too independent, she said. And with Ashton Kutcher, is that his last name? Kutcher? I think I'm getting his last name wrong, but you know who I'm talking about. She was too codependent or dependent, not focusing enough on herself, being too, enmeshed in that relationship. So that's what happens if you have the moon in opposition to Venus. You can kind of like have a hard time being balanced with your feelings for another person, you tend to go to extremes. So you can look at oppositions as extremes, where it's like I always call it like a seesaw, where they do one thing to one extreme and then to the other. So it veers from one thing to the other. She has a moon in opposition to Neptune. So that also can indicate projecting your emotions onto another person, but it's that idealism, the idealized version of life, which doesn't exist. If you are looking for a Shangri-La, and everywhere you go, you're disappointed because there's always something that, I think it's the nature of reality that there's contrast in life. You can't just expect everything to be perfect, and you can't expect your relationships to be perfect. That can create a lot of disillusionment. And so that is going on for her. Mercury in conjunction with Neptune, very intuitive mind, very impressionable mind. So that can lead somebody to allow other people to override their thoughts. One thing I thought was very interesting was that she had been sober, I think, for 20 years. And again, Neptune is all about addiction. So if if you're ruled by Neptune, if you have a lot of context to Neptune, you could have a very addictive personality. And the reason that people become addicted is because, I'm not saying this is the only reason, but a lot of it is escapism, because they have a very sensitive nature and they're looking for a way to kind of stop their pain or to distract themselves from their pain. So, and so this is, but see, there's always a flip side, because that same quality of escapism also can make somebody love the movies. Neptune rules photography and I'm sure film itself, and the entertainment industry, and that escapism is a lot of times the impulse that people have to become actors, is that they want or they just are enamored by that route, that you can kind of step into this different world. And the same thing applies for people who love the spiritual life. Neptune is that the spiritual dimensions. So with Mercury in conjunction with Neptune, if you have this as well, this can give you a very intuitive nature, but also that can be good for manifestation, because you're great at visualization. And also artists, because they can hold an image in their mind's eye and be able to recreate it, like somebody who can do a painting by memory. And probably, I think that this is good for memory. I'm not sure. I wonder if, yeah, I mean, water energy, but I know that, when you have a conjunction between two planets, then it gives you it's like, for instance, having a conjunction between Mercury and Neptune, it's like you have Mercury in Pisces. Okay, but that is not necessarily a logical placement. So I'm trying to remember if that's good for memory. Ironically. And it actually can give you quite an illogical mentality. Because Mercury is the way your mind works, and it's not going to be a practical way. And sometimes there can be distortions where the person hears what they want to hear. And this is very good when you're dealing with a dysfunctional childhood. This can be a saving grace, because you can just do a lot of pretending. Oh, well, this is what they meant. And, my parents really, you can kind of like paper over reality and make something your own. But unfortunately, it becomes habitual, and then the person is always creating an alternative narrative. And as someone who has experienced this on a regular basis, I find it very hard to deal with people who engage in this behavior because I can see the self delusion a mile away. And it just like, pisses the living crap out of me. Because, and then if you try to tell them, no, don't you see what this person is doing? They will get mad at you and you're the bad guy. And so this is one of the reasons why if you're dealing with somebody who has a strong Pisces or Neptune influence in their chart, you don't want to fall into the habit of trying to get them to see the light. You either accept them as they are or you move on, because trying to reform these people is a lost cause. They're just too in their own reality, or alternative reality, I should say. And somebody like Demi is definitely immersed in a lot of this. Now, this can go different ways. If you channel it spiritually, you can make a lot of spiritual progress. And she also has Venus in conjunction with Neptune. So again, that idealization of the of love, of and even like, wanting that soulmate. Some people, they look at their partner as maybe they're almost like a business partner. Hey, we make a great team. We're going to have kids and we're very organized. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And it's not necessarily all that romantic. This is somebody who's seeing it as a spiritual bond. And if it turns out to be that way, awesome. If it's not, then it's kind of like hard for this person to really see the truth in the situation. And that can be difficult in terms of trying to, be grounded with love and not get carried away. But this is beautiful for just being, in this kind of a beatific vibe when it comes to falling in love. And Mars square Neptune, how do you, now this is also if you have this, how do you, what is it that you are working towards? Are you delusional in your goals? With the square, this is again, you have to be careful of escapism, of addictive tendencies. Same with Saturn square Neptune. Is the person, very have an addictive nature? Saturn can be disciplined, but it's squaring here. So it's hard. The person is dissolving. Saturn is about having a lot of structure, and Neptune is about no structure, and they're clashing. So, when you have a square, it's like you're feeling a frustration, like you want to accomplish something, but you don't know how. Looking at some of her strengths, I would say, she has a conjunction between the Sun and Venus, which gives her a lot of grace, and even with the conjunction between the Sun and Neptune, I think it gives a person a kindly disposition, which is always, and so both of those together, which is very nice, because you know how they say you catch more flies with honey than, with vinegar. So being able to approach people in a hospitable way. Um, she also has a trine between Mercury and Jupiter, which gives somebody a positive mindset. And one of the things I noticed is that even when everything was totally chaotic, she always seemed to learn from her parents' mistakes. Not, she may have, retained a bit of the dysfunctional tendencies, but in general, I think that she could see beyond their what they did wrong and not, repeat it in that way. And that is something that comes when you are able to transcend your current reality. I think a lot of people get caught up in negativity if they cannot see that this is not your future. This is only where you are right now. I've said this before. I have this drawing, and it says something to the effect of, don't think that where you are right now is your only reality. And that's really important because that allows you to dream big and to understand that you hold the power to be able to manifest a different future for yourself. But it's very important to stay positive, obviously. And she has that. Now, I just want to touch very briefly on a couple of other things that I see here. In her fifth house of, it's romance, but also creativity, she has a North Node as well as Mars. They're both in Leo. And Mars is your drive. Leo can be that actress in the fifth house, which is about creative self-expression. The North Node, your destiny. And she actually had one of those in Leo, like I said. She had one of those situations where she ended up, her mother ended up moving her to California. And of course, that's where the show business tends to be centered. And she happened to be going out, to the pool, and the Natasha Kinski was out there. And, at that time, it was when, before she became super famous. And so these kinds of things that happen, the North Node can be nudging you in the direction of your dreams, I would say your destiny, even more so than just some kind of random dream. And then in the sixth house, I kind of had this idea that you would have Pluto in the sixth. If you have Pluto in the sixth house in your chart, that could indicate a eating disorder at some point, because Pluto is about control, and the sixth house can be about diet, health in general, and also your work. So you can be obsessive about your work and maybe a workaholic, but controlling your food intake. Some of this, of course, was due to the nature of the beast of being in show business and having to, be physically looking a certain way. But I do think that sometimes people do this because of a way to feel in control of their life in general. And in her 12th house, she has both Jupiter and Chiron. Boy, is that interesting. And are they in conjunction? That's the question. Yes, they are. Boy, what could that mean? Well, first of all, the 12th house is Pisces house, and I already told you she's got a lot of, Neptune rules Pisces, a lot of this energy that feels very dominant in her chart. And Chiron is the wounded healer in the 12th house, and she has Chiron in Pisces, So there you go. Chiron, can be trauma. Pisces is certainly, a sign that we would associate with suffering, when we look at the challenging aspects of it. So in the 12th house, to have Chiron, if you personally have this, you could possibly be kind of like atoning for sins from another lifetime, who knows, where you just always feel guilty and you don't, and you're living your life that way, where you're just like, and that's why I say it can be very much the victim consciousness. But with Jupiter there, I feel like it's the guardian angel. So something like these little strokes of good fortune that come, maybe like destined to come, the timing of it, what have you, can indicate that the person is healing, because they keep seeing how the universe is blessing them. And they know, and they might not know this consciously, but they intuit that there is some kind of a spiritual force at play here. So anyway, that's just a little taste of the kind of analysis that I do when I do personal readings. And I hope that you found this interesting if you stayed for the whole reading. And if you'd like a personal reading yourself, check me out at rainandmoonastrology.com. The link is below. Take care. Bye.